The cheap paper party blower hit my chest at the same moment my ex's mom told me she wished she had met me first. The purple strips snapped out, wobbled in the air, and drooped against my shirt. The fringe at the tip brushed my chest, and my heart kicked so hard it almost hurt. I locked my jaw and made myself breathe through my nose like I was back on a roof in high wind, waiting for a loose board to settle. She stood a few feet away from me on the right side of the backyard under the string lights. A light beige shawl wrapped her shoulders, but it had slipped just enough to show the thin burgundy strap of her dress. The stupid pink cone hat on her head said, "Happy Birthday" in glitter. It looked like a joke on a woman who had carried a whole life on her back for years. Around us, the party tried to be normal. A long, folding table sagged under paper plates and a striped cake. Balloons were tied to lawn chairs. Someone's speaker played an old pop song too loud. A banner that said, "Happy Birthday" hung crooked and swayed in the night breeze. None of that mattered. The space between us did. The air smelled like cut grass and frosting and the faint sawdust that followed me everywhere no matter how hard I scrubbed my hands. In Oak Haven, one rumor could burn a business to the ground. One picture of me standing too close to my ex's mom and I would be the guy nobody hired. "Happy birthday," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant. She lowered the party blower. Her smile did not vanish. It shifted. Smaller, braver, like she had just stepped off a ledge and decided to trust the landing. "I wish I'd met you first, Reed," she whispered, before the timeline got so messy. A cold line slid down my spine. Richard hovered near the patio door with a drink in his hand. Half in shadow, he was not smiling. He was calculating. He always looked like he was deciding what something was worth, what someone was worth. Laura's fingers tightened around the plastic stem of the party blower until the paper crinkled. I took one deliberate step closer, angling my shoulder so I blocked Richard's view of her, close enough to smell her shampoo under the sugar and night air, close enough to hear her breath hitch. "Timelines can change," I said. I did not step back. I should not have been there at all. I was the ex. The mistake from 6 years ago. The kid who dated her daughter Maddie in high school, loved her as hard as a teenage boy could, then watched her drive away to college 2 states over while the whole town nodded like they had expected it. Now I was 28. I had a small mortgage, a truck that always smelled like pine air freshener and dust, and hands full of calluses. I built decks, pergolas, barn conversions, work people liked to take pictures of and post online, work they argued about over coffee at the diner. My business lived and died on referrals and Oak Haven's mouth. Laura was Maddie's mom, 39. Old enough to know better, people would say. But she did not feel like a warning to me. She felt like a woman who had been holding up a roof with her bare hands for years and had somehow learned to smile anyway. The only reason I was at her birthday was because of a job. I had been the contractor for the charity gala property behind her bakery, the Gilded Crumb. The old deck had been half rotten. The pergola was a hazard. The county inspector had threatened to shut the whole venue down. I had replaced the ledger board, swapped the railings, made it safe. Then I had made the mistake of noticing her. "Reed," a smooth voice said behind me. "Stop looming over the birthday girl." Richard. 50. Expensive loafers, cheap warmth. He walked like he owned the grass and the lights in the air, like the world was a ledger and only he held the pen. "I'm not looming," I said, "just checking structural integrity." He smiled without his eyes. "Of course you are." Laura's gaze flicked to him, then back to me. A tiny flinch, a breath held. Richard turned his head toward her, but stared through her like she was part of the scenery. "I'll expect the site ready for inspection next week. Business is business. Don't make me regret being flexible." There it was, the lever. He owned the historic building where the Gilded Crumb sat. Laura ran the bakery, but Richard held the lease like a chain. Every time she tried to pull free, he tightened it. Inspections, fees, threats. It sounded reasonable to people who had never lived inside that kind of control. "It will be ready," I said before she could jump in and apologize. "Permits, inspection window, everything." Richard's eyes swept over my work boots, my dusty jeans, the faint mark where my tool belt usually sat. "Don't disappoint me, son." Vain, he drifted away, already bored. Lara exhaled like she had been holding that breath since her wedding day. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. I looked toward the edge of the yard where my truck sat under a tree. Beyond that, in the dark, was the old cabinet shop I had bought on Mill Street. A beat-up building with one workshop bay and a small loft above it. Half renovated. Empty. Waiting for a purpose. "I'm not great at watching people get cornered," I said. "Besides, I've been working on my own place, the workshop. There's a loft up top and a front room that's been sitting empty. I keep thinking it deserves someone who actually uses it." She blinked, caught off guard. "You bought that old shop on Mill Street?" "Yeah." I shrugged like it was not a big deal. "Still smells like pine and glue. I fix it up between jobs." Her eyes stayed on mine a second too long. Not romantic yet, just interested, like she was filing it away. Then she lifted the party blower again. With a half smile that was almost a challenge, she aimed it at my chest and blew. The paper popped out and tapped my shirt. My pulse jumped again. 3 days later, the sky opened up. A flash flood warning hit Oak Haven just after noon. The river behind the gala venue rose fast, chewing up the banks like it had been waiting. Wind shoved rain sideways. Branches slapped against barn walls. The whole world turned the color of wet steel. I was loading lumber into my truck when my phone rang. Lara's name lit the screen and my stomach tightened. "Reed." Her voice was tight. "The old gazebo. The tarp you put up is ripping. The river's coming up the back lot. Richard said he won't send a crew until the rain stops." That meant never. "I'm on my way," I said. The drive was a blur of wipers and white knuckles. Water ran across the road in thick sheets. My truck slid once, then caught again. I did not slow down. When I pulled into the property, Lara was already out there in the storm, fighting a heavy blue tarp like it was a living thing. Her hair stuck to her cheeks. Her hands were red from the cold. The wind snapped the canvas hard enough to drag her off balance. "Lara!" I shouted, jumping out and running through the mud. "Let go!" She didn't. Of course she didn't. I grabbed her around the waist and pulled her back just as the tarp tore free and whipped over the gazebo like a sail. Rain hit my face so hard it hurt. The ground was slick and soft under my boots. For half a second, she was pressed against me, breath rough, eyes wide. My grip was firm and steady, not possessive. Her hands curled into my jacket. "Don't let me go," she whispered. "Not happening," I said. We moved like we had done this 100 times together. We had not. But it felt that way. I threw a rope line over the crossbeam of the gazebo while she held the ladder with both hands and dug her boots into the mud. The wood was slick under my palms. Rain ran down my sleeves and into my shirt. The gazebo groaned under the wind. The river hissed behind us. "Left corner now!" She yelled over the storm. She was not panicking anymore. She was directing. I pulled the tarp back into place, tied fast knots, and shifted my weight until the line held. My shoulders burned. My hands slipped once and the ladder shook. Lara grabbed it tighter and locked her eyes on me like she could keep me up by will alone. When the tarp finally stayed, the danger did not vanish, but it stopped feeling wild. The problem had shape now. Something we could fight one step at a time. We ran into the barn office, soaked and shivering. The small room smelled like sawdust, wet hay, and faint yeast from her bakery down the road. It was a strange mix, but it felt alive and safe. She grabbed a clipboard like it was armor. "We need sandbags on the back line," she said to the 2 teenage workers inside. "Get everyone away from the river. Inside only. Nobody goes near the bank." They rushed off, listening to her like she was the only solid thing left in the storm. When she finally looked back at me, water dripped from her hair and ran down her jaw. She looked younger and older at the same time. Tired, strong, worn out from carrying too much. "You came," she said. "I told you I would," I answered. I pulled a dry towel from my toolbox and held it out. I made sure my fingers did not brush her skin. Careful, respectful. A line I did not want to cross without her choice. She took the towel and wrapped it around her shoulders. She did not step back. "Why are you always the one showing up?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "Because you are usually the one who shows up for everyone else," I said. Her throat moved like she had to swallow something heavy. She looked away first. The next morning, the sun was out, but the storm had left marks everywhere. Branches on the road, mud lines on the barn, a tired quiet that settled over town. I went to the Gilded Crumb to fix her back gate. It was a small repair I could pretend was just business. The bell over the door chimed when I walked in. Warm air hit my face, full of the smell of bread and sugar. The kind of smell that made your shoulders drop even if your head was still a mess. Laura stood behind the counter with flour on her forearms. Her hair was pinned up too tight. Her posture was so straight it looked like it hurt. A stack of invoices sat by her elbow, a notebook full of permit notes, a half-full tray of pastries she was not even looking at. She had turned herself into a list of tasks. She slid a printed invoice across the counter without meeting my eyes. "This is for the emergency call yesterday and for the gate. Full rate." I did not pick it up. "Laura," I said, "we need to talk about last night." "No, we don't." She finally looked up and the guard was back in her eyes, hard and careful. "Look at this town. They already talk when I breathe wrong. If they see you and me together, if Richard hears one whisper, he can pull the lease. I lose the bakery. I lose everything." Her hand was wrapped around a pin so tight her knuckles had gone white. I stepped a little closer to the counter, still on my side. "I'm not asking you to blow up your life." Her gaze jumped to the front window like she expected someone to be standing there with a camera. She took a quick step backward, then turned her back on me and moved to the pastry rack. She started lining up croissants in perfect rows, too neat, too fast. It was not work. It was escape. "I'm asking you to stop apologizing for existing," I said. She did not answer. She focused on the tray like her life depended on it. "Fine." I picked up the invoice and folded it once, slow. "I'm just the contractor." I turned toward the back door, then paused. A delivery schedule was taped to the fridge. The supplier had shorted her on flour. Twice. Someone had crossed the number out and written a smaller amount in angry pen marks. "I'm calling your supplier," I said. "They keep shorting you on bags. You're going to get what you pay for." "Read," she said, warning in her tone. "I'm the contractor. I cut in." Contractors fix problems. I fixed the gate hinge out back, oiled the latch until it closed smooth, and left without touching her. I sat in my truck outside for a full minute before starting the engine. My hands shook on the wheel, not from anger, but from the effort it took to walk away. Over the next 2 weeks, just the contractor turned into a lie we both repeated while the world was not looking. I was at the Gala property every day. Laura was everywhere. At the bakery at dawn. At the permit office at noon. At the barn by night. We moved around each other like pieces in the same pattern. The intimacy was not in big touching. It was in the small things. One Tuesday, I found her asleep at her desk in the barn office. Her cheek was pressed to a stack of paperwork. Her phone was face down beside her, like she had tried to shut the world up and failed. I did not wake her. I picked up the empty coffee mug by her hand, washed it in the tiny sink, and made fresh coffee. I set it near her elbow. I took off my hoodie and laid it over her shoulders gently, careful not to brush bare skin. Then I went back to work. An hour later, I was on a ladder fixing a light fixture when I heard the floorboard creak behind me. The smell of yeast and sugar reached me before she spoke. "Thank you," she said, voice rough from sleep. I tightened the last screw. "Eat something today." "I will," she said. I did not believe her, but I let it go. That night, after we finished sanding the last banister, we sat on the barn office floor with a pizza box between us. We ate like teenagers hiding from parents, except we were really just hiding from exhaustion and fear. Grease stains spread on the cardboard. Sawdust stuck to the slices. Lara laughed when I tried to blow it off, and it flew right into my mouth. "You're going to eat pine shavings," she said. "I've eaten worse on job sites," I muttered, and she laughed again, softer now. The office lights flickered once, then steadied. The storm from the week before had left the power system touchy. I made a note in my head to check the lines before the gala. Lara wiped sauce from her thumb and looked at me like she wanted to ask something but was afraid of the answer. "What?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded toward the small window that looked out toward town. "You mentioned your workshop, the one you bought, Mill Street." I swallowed my bite. "Yeah." "What made you buy it?" she asked. I leaned back against the wall, pizza slice dangling in my hand. "It was cheap," I said. "It was solid, and I was tired of paying rent to guys who act like Richard." Her mouth tightened at his name. "There's a loft above the shop," I added, lighter. "I'm framing it out. The front bay is empty too. Clean. Bright. I keep thinking the right person could make something out of it. I just haven't found them yet." Lara looked down at the pizza box. When she spoke, her voice was small. "It sounds peaceful." "It's mostly dust and bad jokes right now," I said, "but it's mine." She nodded once, like she was storing the thought in some private place. The night before the first formal inspection, I should have gone home. Instead, my hands moved on their own. I grabbed my toolbox, my keys, and drove back to the bakery. The front lights were off, but the kitchen glowed warm in the back. The smell of dough was thick in the air. Lara stood at the stainless steel table, rolling dough with her sleeves pushed up, hair loose around her face. She looked up when I stepped in, first startled, then oddly relieved. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I know," I answered. I set the toolbox down. "I came anyway." Silence settled between us, not awkward, heavy. She wiped flour off her hands and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gentle move showed the line of her neck. My hands stayed at my sides. "Lara," I said quietly. "If you want me gone, say it. I'll go." Her eyes held mine. The guard was there, but thinner now, like she was tired of lifting it. "And if I don't?" she asked. I took one slow step closer, close enough to feel the warmth from the ovens, close enough to know I was crossing a line I could not uncross. I stopped there and waited. Her fingers moved first. Lara's hand came up slowly and caught my wrist. It was not a tug. It was a choice, a clear answer. "Don't leave," she whispered. That was enough. I lifted my hand and cupped her jaw, my thumb resting near her cheekbone. My grip was firm enough to ground her, gentle enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She did not pull away. She stepped closer. The first kiss hit like a collision. Her breath was warm against my mouth. She made a soft sound in her throat, like she had been holding everything in for years and it finally slipped out. Her fingers twisted into the front of my shirt and pulled me closer. I kept one hand at her waist, steady, safe. When we finally broke apart, she leaned her forehead against mine. We stood there breathing hard, like we had both run a long race and just crossed the line. I could have stayed like that for hours. A hard knock hit the back door. Lara jerked away, eyes wide. My body went tight out of habit. Another knock, louder this time. "I-A-R-A, County Inspector?" A man's voice called. "Unannounced visit." My heart dropped into my shoes, early, unannounced. Exactly the kind of move Richard loved. Lara's face lost all its color. I squeezed her waist once, a quick, grounding touch. "Stay here," I said. "I'll handle it." The rest of that week was a blur of coffee, sawdust, and stress. The inspector went through every inch of the property. The wiring, the gazebo, the deck, the barn. We passed. Barely. But we passed. Richard did not look happy about it. He did not yell. He just stared at the paperwork with tight lips, like the world had refused to follow his plan. Lara did not collapse. She did what she always did. She stood up straighter. She made lists. She spoke to suppliers, donors, and the county clerk like she had not just almost lost everything. I watched her tell a man twice her size no without raising her voice. But the town of Oak Haven is small, and its walls have ears. On Wednesday, I walked into the diner to grab lunch for my crew. The bell over the door rang like normal, but the air felt different. Heavy. Forks paused. A couple of men at the counter glanced at me, then looked away too fast. The waitress, who usually joked about my order, did not meet my eyes. I heard 2 words from a booth behind me, Lara and my name. Then a hush. I pretended not to notice. I paid. I left with the food. When I stepped outside, the sky was clear, but it felt like a storm was forming a few feet above my head. By the time I got back to the property, Maddie's car was already there. My ex. The girl I had once thought I would marry. She was out of the driver's seat before I could even put the truck in park. Her face was tight, her eyes bright with anger she had been feeding on the whole drive from wherever she had been. I barely had my door open when she spoke. "I come home," she said, voice sharp, "and half the town is saying you're sleeping with my mom." The words hit harder than the rain ever did. The barn office door opened behind her. Laura stepped out like she had been pulled by a string. She stopped when she saw Maddie. Guilt flashed across her face. Then fear. Then something like shame. "Maddie," Laura said softly. "Don't," Maddie snapped. "Don't say my name like you're the victim." Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were cold. "How could you?" she threw at her mother. "How could you do this to me?" Laura's shoulders drew in like she was trying to make herself smaller. Her chin dropped. One hand wrapped around her own wrist, thumb rubbing the same spot over and over. Her other hand gripped the door frame until her knuckles turned white. She did not cry. She did not defend herself. She just stood there and took it. Something ugly twisted in my chest. "Maddie," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This is not a public show." "Oh, it already is," she snapped back. "Dad told me you were hanging around again. He said you were trying to ruin her. He said she stopped for a second, searching for words, then pushed through. "He said she's losing it." Laura flinched at that, like the phrase had teeth. Maddie's eyes jumped between us, waiting to see proof that her father was right, waiting for a lie to look true. Laura's voice came out flat. "Reed, you need to go." Quote. "Laura, please," I said. She still would not look at me. That hurt more than her words. "Finish the job," she said. "But this cannot happen. I cannot do this to her." My throat burned. I swallowed hard. I nodded. One slow, controlled nod. The kind you give when everything inside you wants to explode, but you refuse to let it. "I'll have the deck finished by Friday," I said. "Then I'm gone." Then I turned and walked away before they could see my face break. I worked like a machine after that. Measure, cut, drill, repeat. I kept my head down. I talked to my crew. I did not go near the barn office unless I had to. When I did, I made sure my voice was calm and my hands were steady. Thursday night, my cousin Ty, who was helping with the event, texted me. "Power flickering in the main tent," he wrote. "Richard is screaming at her. She's alone." I stared at the screen in my dark kitchen. My house was quiet. My truck keys sat on the table. I could feel the choice like a weight in my hand. I thought of Lara's fingers on my wrist in the bakery, of her voice when she said don't leave, of her small, tired, "You came," of her standing in front of Maddie, taking blame with her chin down and her shoulders curled. I picked up my keys. I put on my only suit, a charcoal gray one that still smelled faintly like the last wedding I had gone to as a guest, not a worker. I drove to the venue with my jaw tight and my stomach twisted. When I stepped into the main tent, I felt it right away. The lights were pulsing. The sound system buzzed. It was that low, angry sound that told me too much was loaded onto one line. Richard stood near the small stage, his voice raised so that everyone at the nearest tables could hear. He was in his element, full of fake concern and sharp words. "What kind of operation are you running?" he said loudly. "Maybe the county should take another look." Laura stood 2 steps below him. Her jaw was tight, her hands clasped in front of her so hard her fingers were white. Her face was calm, but her eyes were dark with quiet fury. I did not walk toward them right away. I went behind the stage to the breaker panel I had upgraded before. Ty was there, eyes wide. "He told the caterer to plug in 3 extra heat lamps," Ty said, "on the same line after you told him not to." Of course he had. I opened the panel. The load indicator was in the red. I flipped the auxiliary switch and moved the extra load onto the new line I had installed for this exact reason. The buzz stopped. The lights steadied. The tent filled with a warm, even glow again. The donors relaxed a little, not even knowing why. But I knew. And Laura knew when she saw me walk out from behind the stage. I went straight to Richard. "The power is fixed," I said, my voice steady, just loud enough for people near us to hear. "You overloaded the circuit on purpose. You told them to plug 3 extra lamps into a line you were warned about." Several heads turned. A few people stopped mid-conversation. Richard's nostrils flared. "The handyman returns," he said in a fake light tone. "I thought you were fired." "I finished my job," I said. "And I don't work for you." Laura's eyes met mine. For a moment, the tent fell silent in my head. It was just her and me, and the choice hanging between us again. Richard gave a thin laugh. "You're very brave for a boy whose business lives on goodwill." I stepped half a pace closer, enough to block his line of sight to Laura. "Try it," I said calmly. "And explain to your donors why you sabotaged your own charity event to humiliate the woman who built it." A soft murmur moved through the crowd. People shifted in their seats. No one laughed with him. Laura took one step forward. Not behind me. Beside me. "Richard," she said, her voice clear and steady, "you don't get to control me with paperwork anymore. The lease ends in 60 days. I'm not renewing." Richard's smile slipped for the first time. For a second, Richard just stared at her like she had spoken a foreign language. Then his jaw tightened. "Laura, stop being dramatic," he said. "You do not get to throw away my investment because you are upset. Tell her, Maddie. Tell your mother to stop embarrassing herself." He turned, looking for backup. Maddie was standing near the edge of the tent, arms folded tight. Her face was pale. She did not move. She did not speak. She did not look at him. Her eyes were locked on her mom. Something in Richard's expression cracked when he realized she was not on his side. He looked smaller for a heartbeat, then cold again. He glanced around, noticing the way donors and staff were watching him now, not her. Their faces were tight. Their mouths were pressed flat. No one was smiling. He knew he had lost this room. Without another word, he stepped down from the stage and walked out of the tent. He did not slam anything. He did not shout. He left like a man already building his next plan in silence, and somehow that was almost worse. The party tried to pick itself back up. The band started again. People went back to talking. But something had changed. The whispers in Oak Haven were no longer only about scandal. Now they were also about what they had just seen. Laura standing up to the man who thought he owned her life. Later that night, after the last donor left and the sound crew packed up, the tent felt like a giant empty chest. The lights over the new deck glowed soft and warm. I found Laura sitting on the edge of the deck I had built. Her heels dangled above the grass. The night smelled like damp earth, faint smoke from some distant fire, and the soft sweetness of sugar that always seemed to follow her. Maddie stood a few feet away, arms crossed, breathing hard like she had just run. She did not look at me at first. Her eyes were on the dark yard. "He is a jerk," she said finally. Her voice was flat. "Yeah," I said, sitting down beside her with space between us. "He is." "I hate that he controls everything," she said. "I hate that I let him." "You are allowed to be angry," I said, "but don't aim it at her." Maddie's throat moved. She swallowed hard. Her eyes shifted to her mom. Lara was standing a few steps back, hands wrapped around each other, shoulders tight like she was braced for another punch. "Dad told me Mom was losing it," Maddie said. "He said she was making bad choices. He said you were taking advantage of her." She looked at me when she said the last part. I felt the weight of it and did not look away. "He lied," I said softly. "She is not losing it. She is fighting back." Maddie's face crumpled at the edges like she was seeing something clearly for the first time. She turned fully toward Laura. "I'm sorry," she said. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was real. Laura's fingers trembled where they held her own wrist. She made herself let go and drop her hands. Then she nodded once, sharp and quick, like she was afraid if she moved more she would fall apart. Maddie stepped forward and hugged her. It was not perfect. It was stiff and messy and full of years of hurt. But it was a start. A few minutes later, Maddie left, giving us space without being asked. The air felt different when she was gone. Lighter. Still dangerous, but lighter. Laura sat down on the deck where Maddie had been. I shifted a little closer, not touching her. Just there. "I do not know where to go," she said quietly. "If I walk away from the lease, I walk away from the bakery. That is my whole life, my staff, my regulars, my recipes. Everything is in that building. You do not have to jump without checking the ground," I said. She looked at me, eyes tired and wary. "What ground?" "You remember my workshop on Mill Street?" I asked. "The one I told you about. Old cabinet shop. Front bay, loft, upstairs." She nodded slowly. "The front bay has been sitting empty," I said. "It is not fancy, but it is clean and solid. The loft upstairs is framed. There is a separate entrance. You could bake there. Set up a counter. Have your own place without his name on the paperwork." Her mouth parted a little, like I had knocked the air out of her. "You really have that?" she asked. "I have had it," I said. "I just did not know who it was for." Her eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. She stared at me like she was trying to figure out if this was another trap. I raised my hand slowly and touched her jaw. My thumb brushed the edge of her cheek. The contact was light but sure. "I am not scared of Richard," I said, "but I am scared you will disappear again and I will not be able to find you." Saying it felt like ripping open my chest, but I said it anyway. Laura's fingers came up and wrapped around my hand. She held it against her jaw. "I am here," she whispered. "I am not disappearing." She leaned in first, clear, chosen, no doubt. I kissed her once, slow and certain. Not rushed, not secret. A promise more than anything else. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. Around us, the last string lights on the deck hummed softly. The power was steady. Not because the world was safe, but because we had rewired one small corner of it. 3 months later, the new bakery was open. It was smaller than the Gilded Crumb, but it was ours. The sign in the window said, "The Loft," in neat black letters. The bay door let in the morning light. The ovens filled the room with the smell of bread and butter. We had earned every inch of that space. We stripped old paint from the walls until our wrists ached. We sanded the counters. We swept piles of sawdust that looked like small snowdrifts. I built shelves from reclaimed oak. She stained them herself, hands smudged dark, laughing when I tried to keep her clean. She painted the walls a soft, warm white while standing on a ladder in jeans and an old t-shirt. Her hair was tied up. Her face was streaked with paint. She looked more free than I had ever seen her. We hung pendant lights over the front counter. We argued about where to put the display case. We fixed a stubborn drain trap at midnight. Both of us crouched on the floor with a wrench between us, refusing to quit. On opening morning, the air inside smelled like sawdust and fresh bread together. It was my new favorite smell. Laura did not hide in this place. She put a painting she had done herself 20 years ago on the shelf above the register. It was a little crooked, a little raw, completely honest. I was cutting a last board at the table saw in the back when she walked in from the front with a small basket on her arm. "Lunch break," she said, sounding proud and playfully bossy at the same time. I wiped my hands on a rag and tried not to smile too wide. "How did the morning rush go?" Quote. She grinned. "Mrs. Higgins came in. She ordered 3 dozen scones. Then she asked if you were single." Quote. I felt my shoulders tense without meaning to. "And what did you tell her?" Laura reached into the basket and pulled out something small and purple. It was the same cheap paper party blower from her birthday, the one she had pointed at my chest when she whispered that she wished she had met me first. The paper was a little bent, but it still worked. I stared at it, then at her. "I told her," Lara said, eyes bright, "that the man who built these shelves is taken." Then she lifted the blower to her lips and blew. The purple strip shot out toward me with that same pathetic squeak, wobbling in the air like a ribbon. It tapped my chest and curled back. This time I laughed. A real laugh that came from somewhere deep and surprised. She crossed the space between us, standing in the wide-open bay doorway where anyone walking by on Mill Street could see. Paint was still under her nails. Flour dusted her wrist. She set the blower down on the workbench, slid her hand up to the back of my neck, and kissed me. Not hidden. Not stolen. Not guilty. Simple. Sure. Ours. Outside, the sign on the window swung a little in the breeze. The loft. Inside, the yeast rose in the proofing box. The sawdust settled on the floor. The shelves held steady. So did the life we had built with our own hands.